agenda tonight because we're still in operating budget season as well. But our first item on the agenda tonight is to welcome Don Vaughn of the Colonial Water Company. The Colonial Water Company supplies water to private residences in Dover as well as to town center. When the Church Street well was impacted by MTBE contamination many years ago, a lot of the residences and the town offices here in the center of Dover were connected to the Dover Water Company at the time. And the Colonial Water, which bought Dover Water Company, now supplies the water. So we have a contract with Colonial Water. It's up for a 3-year extension, and we thought it was time to bring Mr. Vaughn in to talk a little bit about Colonial Water. So welcome tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
So would you like to tell us a little bit about the company and who you are, what you do, who you supply, so forth and so on?
Sure, I'd be happy to.
Thank you.
As you know, Colonial Water Company was acquired by New England Service Company, which is a holding company, in 2011. And we have been running the water company for that time. We have some sister companies. One is in Connecticut, another one is in Plymouth, Mass. And we have been basically pretty experienced in the water business. We have done a few things with Colonial Water Company which we are happy with. We've installed almost 100% of radio read water meters in the system. That's been an attempt to reduce any losses that the company might experience, and also to help us calculate unaccountable water in a more precise and timely fashion. We've done a little bit of pump station work, and we hope to do some more in the coming year or two. We've instituted some billing formats which we think are pretty helpful to our customers. One would be that we have calculated the average daily use as an example on the water bills. We've introduced online payments, credit card payments. We have also showed a 12-month history of water consumption so that water bills might be a little bit more predictable to the customers. We have the monthly billing that we instituted so that leaks on domestic plumbing of the customers might be detected a little bit earlier to reduce their costs and wasted water. So there have been several things that we've been involved in. We're happy that we have had a pretty good receptivity of these improvements, and we're willing to listen to any suggestions or comments that any of the customers in Dover have.
Thank you. How many households in Dover do you supply?
We have approximately 580 customers. About 65 of them are on the town system.
What's your capacity for servicing residents of Dover?
The capacity?
Yeah.
Well, the capacity is limited by our production, which comes through our Water Management Act permit.
Okay.
We have 2 permits. One is from the Charles River Basin, the other is from the Boston Harbor Basin. And our Water Management Act allows us on an average to produce about 140,000 gallons per day. So we're comfortably above that in terms of our allowance.
So I'm sorry, could you just clarify, the Water Management Act allows you to pump 140,000 a day?
On average.
On average.
On daily average.
And how many, what do you actually pump on average?
Well, it varies. It's seasonal. In the winter, we might be down in the vicinity of 90,000 gallons a day. In the summer, we could be up in the area of a couple of 100,000 gallons a day. And that depends also on irrigation, which is a huge driver of what they call a peaking factor, which means the particular maximum day versus the average day per year. So irrigation really impacts the system.
It certainly impacts my bill, so I get that. The average is based on 365 days, or is it?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And have you been adding households?
We have. We had an extension to Comiskey Road. We added some houses there. I think we were about 8 or 9. We had a subdivision at Kirby Estates. And I think that was about 7 houses or so.
Are you doing Dancer Farm as well?
Yes, we did dance farms also, and I think if my memory serves me correctly, I think that was about maybe 8 houses. So that would, the combination of those would amount to about the 500, did I say about 80 customers or so earlier.
And do you have a business plan that where you're proactively looking at expansion, or do you react to various developers coming to you asking for your expansion?
Well, the business plan we have is very simple. It's the same as all our systems, and that is to do the things that are necessary to improve the system, improve the integrity of the system, ensure the reliability of it, be particularly attentive to water losses, unaccounted for water as such. Certainly, if we're approached by a developer who has passed muster, if you will, with all the town boards and zoning's appropriate, which we have no purview of, or septic system requirements and so forth, we certainly would have and would be obligated to listen to them, to consider whether we could serve them.
Perhaps it's our fault, but over the last few years, as I've been a selectman, we haven't had these type of conversations with you, and we should have had these at least on a regular basis. Because Mass General Law dictates certain things that, quite honestly, we can't act on, and it's notifications or approval of expanding inside of the town municipal water system and outside the town municipal water system. And I know we really haven't acted on those type things in the last 5 years that I've been sitting on this particular table. But I think it's more of a communication thing that I like to see improve versus an approval or disapproval thing, which is a whole different ball of wax. So I really want to improve the communication between Colonial and the town, specifically the Board of Selectmen.
Yeah, I mean, to that point, in looking at the original agreement, this was between Dover Water Company and the town of Dover in 1994. And it speaks to copies of all Department of Environmental Protection required water quality reports be sent to the town of Dover, and annual reports to the Department of Public Utilities submitted by the water company shall also be forwarded to the water commissioners, which in this case is the selectmen. And to our knowledge, we don't get any kind of reports from you on any kind of annual basis.
If we have not had that communication, it's not because we were reluctant or did not want to. We would be more than happy to do that. As a matter of fact, we would be receptive. It's basically public information. We'd be happy to offer that to you. And to your point, we would be happy to get together with you, communicate in fashion you would want.
Good, thank you very much.
That would be great. And perhaps if you can get to Mr. Ramsey, just copies of your, I don't know if you do it on a calendar year or a fiscal year, your last set of reports to the
Sure.
to the states, and that'd be very helpful just to have. So I have my own private well, so I don't, I've heard different things, and I know that you use.
Yep, a very happy customer.
Yep.
Love to see my bills lowered, but but I'm a happy customer.
So can you explain, just from an engineering standpoint, how the water is delivered? How many wells do you have? How are they connected? Is it surface water? Is it aquifer, how deep are the wells? How do you, where do you get the water?
It's all groundwater. There are two types of sources. There are surface water and there's groundwater. Typically, smaller systems rely on groundwater unless they're served by, as an example, the MWRA or some large water utility that has a large reservoir system. Dover has offhand about about 4 sources. One is on Chickering Drive, another one is on Draper Road, another one would be on, would be at Francis Street, and then the 4th one would be Norwood Drive. The wells are typically gravel packed, and they're in the vicinity of 40 to 60 feet deep, somewhere in that area. Each one has specific statistics, if you will, and all that information is in the annual statistic report, which is submitted on an annual basis yearly, and we'd be happy to make sure that you have a copy of that.
Thanks. So somebody had mentioned to me that they're looped in such a way so that you're not drawing down from one particular well? Is that correct?
Yes, they all contribute to the system with the exception of Chickering. Chickering is an isolated system, but the other well sources are all connected in a fashion that if one went down, there would be some redundancy to serve the distribution system from the remaining ones that were online.
No, I'm sorry, Chickering, Knollwood, Francis Street, and who's the 4th?
Draper.
Draper, thank you.
So does the Chickering well service?
Chickering Drive
Okay, Chickering,
exclusively and only.
okay.
You talked briefly about what you have done to improve the systems. Do you have other contemplated or planned improvements?
Yes, we do. We'll put together a capital plan for 2015. We want to do, as an example, some work at Knollwood Drive Pump Station. That's an older station. It needs some upgrading and basically structure and mechanical investment, if you will. We want to make it more reliable, easier to operate, easier to serve, to be serviced, essentially. So that would be an example of some of the capital improvements that we would make in 2015. And there would be various other things that we would make as we do all of our water systems. We prepare a capital plan going forward for the next years, for budgeting purposes.
Yeah, I'd be hesitant if I didn't ask the next question, which is, probably not a popular question. The last request for a rate increase was March 2011, which was, the request was 28%. Do you have contemplated your next rate increase, and do you have an idea what it will be?
Don't have any idea. It's if we have any influence on this, which we do, we don't anticipate anything in the foreseeable future.
Good, thank you.
I know I have a house in Mashpee, and I get an annual mailing from them with a report on the results of their testing.
We get that too.
Do you get that as well?
Yeah.
It's called the Consumer Confidence Report. It's mandated by the EPA. Has to be in customers' hands typically July 1st, depending on the size of the system. In some small systems, it can appear in, as an example, a public place such as a library. But we do that every year.
Good.
And there obviously then aren't any issues with the water quality or
Water quality is very good.
That's very good.
There may be some traces of manganese and iron in it, but certainly well below what the MCL, which is called the maximum contaminant level. Iron and manganese is what they would call a secondary parameter, I think. It's not, I don't think that's the word, but it's not a regulated health quality trait as such.
So it's not like E. coli or sodium that really have major health issues.
Sodium, we run in the 20s, but I believe it was slightly over the state limit, the MCO, which is 20 milligrams per liter, 20 parts per million. And so we have to notify in our consumer confidence report that that is the case. The EPA standard on a federal level is 50 parts per million. So in the big picture, it's not, anything that's of particular health significance, although there may be some people out there that have highly sensitive dietary restrictions, particularly regarding to sodium.
Good.
Have you heard, either officially or anecdotally, about any problems of folks that are close to your wells having problems with their own private wells, water levels?
No.
So as you know, there's an issue that Dover is facing that we need to address long-term, which is the impact of increased development on water. And the anecdotal information we have from private well owners is that the wells are getting deeper and deeper and deeper.
That's not my understanding. I haven't heard anything to that effect. You have to remember also that the septic systems, as an example, basically recharge these systems. To my knowledge, there's no drop in any of the aquifer at all that I have heard of. And I query this every once in a while, particularly during dry periods in the summer. We monitor observation wells on an ongoing basis or a routine basis, but we have not seen anything that would indicate that the aquifer itself is dropping.
So what is an observation well?
What is an observation well? It's a test well, generally about 2 inches in diameter, is driven, and it's used typically to determine if a site might be a good location for developing what they would call a production well. And they being well drillers and laboratories and water utilities would sample the water to see what the quality was, to see if it might be an optimal location for driving a well. So they leave these observation wells in later on to monitor the aquifer.
So how many do you monitor?
I'd have to check on that. There's got to be 2 or 3 anyway, strategically located
Within Dover?
within Dover.
And those are deeper wells, so they're actually monitoring the aquifer versus groundwater, or?
Well, it's the same thing. The groundwater, they're almost synonymous. Groundwater could be used as a term for aquifer. The groundwater level is an example. But we are aware of them, and we take occasional meetings on them.
And is there any requirement to report those readings on a regular basis to the state?
No.
So when the DEP says that, you're only at 60% capacity or 80% capacity, where is their how do they get their denominator?
The state would say relative to capacity would be referring to reservoirs and water utilities that have surface waters. Dams, reservoirs typically draw down during the year, and maybe September or October of a particular year, they may be at significantly less than 100% capacity. So that would be relative to surface water. Relative to groundwater, we have restrictions built right into our Water Management Act permit. As to most Water Management Act permits, I can't say that all of them do because I'm not aware of them, of all of them, but ours are become calendar triggered in that during the summer months, we need to communicate with our customers saying that water is restricted during a particular period of time. And in our case, in Colonial Water Company's case, that restriction is watering on one of 2 days, or actually 2 days of the week. And I believe it's Sunday and maybe a weekday like Wednesday, I think. I'd have to check with our local operator and determine that.
But that's just, I don't mean just in a negative way, that's just good water management practices in general for water conservation, but there's no scientific, there's no data behind it. Is there, in other words, is there any data that can say to the town of Dover, and I'm just tapping your expertise in this, so, that your aquifer, given recharge rates of your aquifer and the current state of the aquifer, that it's safe to, usage of 140,000 gallons per day or something is safe, it's not going to impact the level of the aquifer, or 200,000, whatever the numbers are. I mean, is there any data behind all this?
The data is driven, as an example, by the flow in the Charles River. And I need to refresh my memory on this, but all of these scientific and engineered and measured data drivers are listed in our Water Management Act permit. I believe there is stage 1, 2, 3, and 4 drought restrictions, and they are all tied to the Charles River flow. And that would be, those restrictions would be promulgated, I believe, through the Corps of Engineers. We haven't experienced this kind of restriction, but on further study of our Water Management Act permit, and there's an awful lot of boilerplate there. We could get you that information, so it would probably be more helpful to you than what I'm just saying now, because I'm speaking in generalities here.
If I may, so you have a level of the Charles River that everyone at the state or the EPA mandates, okay, it's at 60%. Your test wells say the same thing?
They probably would not, I'm guessing, because of various things like soil characteristics, permeability.
But within a range, would they be close?
They could be. It could be. I'd be hesitant to give you a specific answer.
Yeah, I don't want to pin you down. I'm just curious to that.
But the Water Management Act permit, as I said, lays this out. And as I said also, I believe there are 4 drought conditions. We haven't seen those here, but they exist, and we would have to comply with them pursuant to the permit itself.
So the restriction of pumping on average 140,000 gallons per day, does that restrict the number of homes you could be providing water to?
No, it doesn't, but it does impact projects that we may want to, or may come before us to determine whether they could receive water from us.
Okay.
If it was a very large development, we'd have to really study this and to see if it were possible to do this. Again, we would be under obligation to proceed in this direction.
So
How does one study
Well,
that?
I just want on a practical basis, if I may. So Dover just went through a 6-month effort to acquire 27 acres of land to avoid a 40B project. and it was going to be 90 bedrooms, 40 or so townhouses. And the developer told us that they would be using your water. So had you been asked by the developer to do any kind of research to say, yes, we can supply that water to you?
The answer is we have had a single communication, and we made no commitments. We did, we would necessarily have to evaluate the project to see if we could serve it, but we didn't make any commitments that, you know, we were ready and available to do that. It would be subject to further investigation.
Thank you. Interesting. I'm sorry.
Well, this is just very interesting. I really appreciate you coming in because it's good to learn about how the water is supplied to us and the restrictions that are in place.
It's an interesting business, it's an interesting job, it's dynamic, and there are many, many balls in the air to balance.
I'm sure.
Do you have any more?
No, I know.
Thank God it's not California.
Yeah.
I would just like to emphasize the fact of open communications going forward. I think will help all parties concerned, and I
We'll
appreciate that.
facilitate that.
Thank you very
I'll make
much.
it my business to get that done.
I appreciate it. I know we have some representatives of various organizations here tonight, so I would like to give them the opportunity to ask you any questions. So Barbara from the Board of Health, nothing?
Nothing.
Candace,
I have a
comment?
question from Conservation Commission. I'm interested in knowing where the locations are for the observation wells.
I believe they are, I think they're at Knollwood Drive, Francis Ave, and I believe there's one or two maybe at Draper Road. But I can get that information to you.
So they're basically at the same site as the production well?
Yes. Because they would do a lot of the exploration, investigation prior to construction of the production well itself.
I see.
And I have one more follow-up question, if I may. And this may be my naivete. I thought that I believe they call it the Morse aquifer, but I thought the aquifer that was reaching into Dover actually came about as far as Haven Street. So I'm wondering which aquifer you're tapped into at Draper or Francis Street, or for that matter, even Knollwood. I'm just curious, where is there, are there aquifers under those sites?
I would say, I can't be sure, to be forthright on this. But I believe they are tied into the Charles River aquifer and that basin. They're connected in many, many ways, separated by certain soil formations. But beyond that, I can't answer that question definitively. I would be happy to research it for you and supply you the information.
I'd be very interested, because we do have maps that show the aquifer reaching into the northwest corner of town, but not as far down as Francis or as far in as Draper. So I would be curious to know
Certainly.
where you think that tremendous quantity of water is coming from.
Right, sure.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, if you have any geological, hydrological information to help us out, we would love to tap your resources.
Certainly, and I'd be happy to do that, and we can do that through the communication.
It'd be great.
Be no problem, no issue.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Be happy to do it.
Great, thank you. Amy, do you have anything?
Well, it's just, it's open space committee, but it doesn't really have much to do with open space except, some of the issues around water flow and wells. When you said that your system, Draper, Norwood, and Francis are all interconnected for redundancy, so that any problem at Norwood those houses would be covered by the other systems. Does that mean that the water from the neighborhood around Knollwood mostly comes or always comes from the Knollwood well wells unless there's a problem with the Knollwood wells. And it would only, the redundancy would only kick in if the Knollwood wells went offline for some reason. And similarly, Draper and Francis, so that you said, I mean, sort of the neighborhoods are tapping off only essentially only off the wells that are in their neighborhood, except if there's a problem. Is that the case, or is it truly that it's all kind of pooled and then distributed?
An excellent question. All the sources, all the wells are at any given time in operation. And there are ways that we can produce more water out of one well field than another. Sometimes we give a well field a rest, as an example, or the equipment and the machinery a rest. But they're all wells located in particular areas that draw water through that particular site. They contribute water on a basis that we can program, so to speak. If one of those wells goes off, it becomes offline for whatever reason, then the others contribute. They obviously would contribute a little bit more, but our business basically is to get that line back on, that well back online as soon as possible. I don't know am I getting to your question or not?
Well, I guess that what I'm wondering is, when we look at the amount of water that's being taken out of the wells at Knollwood, for example, is that essentially the amount of water that's going into that neighborhood, or is on a constant basis, is some of that water ending up at Draper or Francis Street because the Draper well generally doesn't produce enough water to supply for that neighborhood?
Okay, I understand your question. I think a little bit more since you repeated it.
Sorry.
Thank you. Thank you. The Draper well and all of the well fields would contribute not only to those neighborhoods, but to other neighborhoods. It's all mixed. It's all fungible, so to speak. They all contribute in their varying degrees to the entire distribution system, Chickering being the exception.
Right, I understand that.
So is it a continuous loop? Does the water flow through a continuous loop so as not to pump more from one well? Or
The wells all contribute to the total distribution system.
so then the wells pump into a distribution system that then, okay, all right.
Yes. Yes. Can be complicated.
So do you have a central holding tank for the water you pump? Or?
We do not, other than what they call hydropneumatic tanks, and they provide some sort of a reserve, a limited reserve, at each location.
All right.
At Francis Street, we have a little bit larger reserve. I want to say I think around 20,000 gallons.
I know you check on the Francis Street well every day.
Right,
I see.
every
I
day.
see.
As we do
your
every
Well,
source.
that's the one I see. So
And we get a report every day. And we understand, we see the pH every day. We do chlorinate, by the way. We chlorinate at the Draper location, and we also chlorinate at Cardi. We look at production from each source. We get a total production for the day. We look at, I look at the unaccounted for water, which we produce from statistics, which has been enabled by the monthly billing, by the way. We can get some fairly precise numbers. And, you know, we want to guard that water. It's precious. And, you know, our numbers are, on an unaccounted for water basis, are in the 5% vicinity. Sometimes it'll creep up to maybe 8-9% or so. We know there's a leak going on someplace. We do leak detection work. We find the leak, repair it, comes back down. So it's when we're operating at those levels, those are optimal levels that we would like, then we're satisfied. So it's very interesting.
So if I may, your unaccounted water is only 8%, 5%?
It's, right now, it's in the vicinity of about 5%.
That's terrific,
It is terrific.
frankly.
It is. I'm very familiar with it.
No, I mean, I know other
Water.
water, that's very unusual. Usually the pipes, have lots of leakage. I believe in Medfield it's somewhere like 25% of your municipal water system.
It's not uncommon. 15% is the industry standard.
Mhm,
When you exceed 15%, the regulators really get after you. They
mhm.
impose restrictions and mandates that I just do not want to have to comply with. I want to avoid that.
Mhm.
And therefore, we have, a very tight system. Now, if we have a leak, it's going to skew that number for the next month. You can have a leak of maybe 5, 10, 15 gallons a minute, or a main break, which is maybe 50 gallons a minute. These are going to skew those numbers. We'll record them, but it'll work out. And so our numbers are based on a 12-month running average. And we have, in fact, we have it on our website. You'll see it.
Well, I have to go to your website. Wait, can you tell us your website for people like?
I think it's, I think it's colonialwatercompany.com,
Okay.
but you can certainly Google it.
Yeah, yeah.
And it'll come up. And that's why we put it on our website, because we're proud of it. I hate to say this, but I want to boast about it.
As you should.
And because I'm very proud of that, and I'm proud of the local operator, Alan, who communicates with me daily. And so, and there's factors, there's numbers like this that we track, and they're all metrics to make sure that we have system integrity. That's what we're looking for.
Well, I know the system works, whether it's monthly billing or your daily work, because we've had some leakages in our town system over the last couple of years, and they've been detected relatively quickly and taken care of.
It's all helpful. You don't want to know that you have a leak. You'd like to turn your back on it, but you really need to address it, because it'll do nothing but get worse, and get worse at the wrong time.
If I may ask you a few more questions, I was
Sure.
around.
I hope I have the answers.
Well, no, you've been extremely helpful. I was around a long time ago, as you probably saw when this last water study was done, and I'm just trying to update some of the
Sure.
information, if I may, on it. So if I'm understanding you right, other than yourselves observing your pumping production, is there any, I think Carol or Jim was getting to this, is there any outside organization that verifies how much you're pumping, independent of your own numbers?
The Department of Environmental Protection, DEP, probably has a way they can verify our numbers. They can look at our production meters, everything is metered. They can certainly look at our demand numbers, which is nothing more than an aggregation of all the customers' meters. It's so hard to cook the books on that. You wouldn't want to do that anyway. You want the numbers. You really
But it
want.
would, like, they'd come in if somebody wanted them to. They don't normally do this. There's not like a DEP person assigned to Colonial Water.
Right.
Okay.
If I may on that one,
Yeah.
how often do you file those reports, the usage reports?
The usage reports are filed annually.
Are they certified?
We don't certify them. They're not certified as such. We make a statement that under the penalties of perjury, et cetera.
Okay, that's good enough, yeah.
Okay. And similarly, if I may, you've been extremely helpful. What about the water quality? Is the testing actually done by Alan? He draws, takes the water, sends it to an independent lab, or is it done by any state agency, again, independent of your own organization?
It's done by an independent lab. Virtually all of our systems are done by independent labs, which are certified by the state. There's an awful lot of credibility and a lot at stake in making sure that they retain their integrity. Alan does test every day for things like pH, chlorine residual, but bacteria, which is sent out on a routine basis, THMs, VOCs, lead and copper, and several other tests. There's virtually thousands of tests that are taken throughout the year.
And you mentioned something about drought restrictions, levels 1 through 4. Who would tell you if there is such a drought restriction so that you could then take actions, unless you did that on your own, so that you could take action so that you're not overtaxing the wells?
The Corps of Engineers and DEP have information through their websites. And is a drought, as an example, lingered, we check those websites out virtually every day. So
So it relies on you taking the initiative,
Yes.
as opposed to they're phoning you or emailing you and saying you're pumping too much, or it's drought for, and stop pumping something.
DEP could call us and would call us and say, is this in effect? Is this taking place? And, they're limited, there's just so many places where they can stop by and check.
Sure.
But that would be a way for them to handle that and manage that drought situation.
Have they ever contacted either Dover Water Company or Colonial Water?
Not to my knowledge.
There's a monitoring station on Mill Street, about halfway down between Willow and Dedham Street. And I've seen people there, checking. I assume it's electronic as well. It's amazing to me that there haven't been repercussions from, because I live on the river, and in the 22 years that I've lived on the river, my dock has gone from being usable all year to launch a canoe to 20 feet of mud flats almost every single summer. And I can't even get out to the main river. So it's amazing. I don't know what a level 1, 2, 3, or 4 drought is, but when it comes to the Charles River levels, boy, have they changed over the years.
And
Justine,
of course,
I want to be cognizant of our time and everything else. So Justine, one more question if you have it, and that's it?
Yeah, I have at least 8.
Pick one.
Okay. Under irrigation systems.
Yes.
Are you, you have the 3 then water system, Plymouth, you said 1 in Connecticut, and where in Connecticut?
Plainville, Connecticut, right next to West Hartford.
Yeah, and then
And we also have a company in New Hampshire, Abenaki, it's an Indian name, around the Lakes region.
And so are any of those systems, do any of those towns prohibit the installation of irrigation systems, or perhaps require low flow, as I understand, irrigation systems that don't, use quite as much water, especially, most of the water, as I understand, quantity issues, drought issues, of course, in the summer, mainly because people water lawns.
Right.
Do any of those towns?
There's no prohibition on irrigation. It just is a demographic more than anything else.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so anything else?
No, thank you.
Very helpful.
Thank
Don,
you
this has
very
been
much.
incredibly helpful. Well, thank you so much. This
Unless
is
you want
really
to
very
stay.
helpful.
I'd be happy to help you in any way I can. and
Appreciate it.
We'll promote the communication, and I will get it going certainly by the end of this week. I'll put the things in place.
Wonderful.
Great.
Thank you so much. You've been
Thanks a
very
lot,
helpful.
Don.
Appreciate it.
Bye.
Take care.
Thank you. So we have before us in our packets the extension agreement between Colonial Water and the town of Dover, which is effective in June 2014.
It's actually not in the folders, Madam Chair. We didn't put them in.
Yeah, I have a copy of
I have a
mine.
copy too, sorry.
Yeah.
It's
Okay.
not my folder.
Oh, okay.
Or mine.
In that, okay,
I
that,
have mine.
okay, do you want to, have you seen it?
I definitely saw it.
Okay, so, I don't know, I haven't heard anything tonight that would impact my decision on voting this extension.
I would agree. As a matter of fact, I was pleasantly surprised by all the processes that they have in place, and they're certainly open to communication with us, which is what we want.
Absolutely, and as I said, perhaps some of the blame should be on this side of the table by not,
Exactly. Engaging them.
inserting
Right.
ourselves in the conversation earlier.
Right.
Yeah, so I think we certainly should, in that wonderful file here that you keep of what the Board of Selectmen review on any particular month, every single year, is work on scheduling an annual meeting with the Colonial Water Company.
Good.
The agreement would be extended to July 30th of 2017. Just a couple little legal changes, liability changes in dollars, nothing substantive.
Mhm.
So do I have a, so this is the, just, so this is the agreement that covers the relationship between the town of Dover and Colonial Water Company for the center of town, for those wells that were impacted by the Church Street contamination. So with that, do I have a motion to accept the extension agreement?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, great.
Subject to execution, I think. we
Yes,
don't have
subject,
the,
we don't, right, yeah.
I do have a copy of it, but I have Mr.
I have a
Vaughn's
copy as well, so,
signature.
I think we had anticipated maybe having to wait till the next meeting.
Yeah.
But Don
No,
was very
didn't.
forthcoming with
This
the
is,
before.
exactly.
But
Yep.
clearly, you know who the newbie on this committee
No,
is.
that's fine.
I don't have
I didn't think,
my contract with me.
that was fine.
This is my water
Shame
file,
on
it's
me.
getting bigger and bigger.
Shame on me.
Trade.
Huh?
Trade.
Trade? Do you have a copy of the old study? I think I gave you a copy of the
Yep.
old study.
Yeah, I have it.
Justine
I
has
have
as
it right
well.
here.
So, before we go on to budgets, any other comments? Those of you in the board?
I just have to admit that we have been getting their annual report continuously. And unfortunately, it never occurred to me, to tell you the truth, to forward that to you. And it is on their website, also accessible. It's a very, very extensive website. So the information is in town and so there never was anything there. The only thing, and I didn't want to bring this up, it was important, is that our sodium limit is a little bit lower. And every once in a while, their sodium jumps up. It is way below DEP and federal level as well. So it's nothing to worry about. It really isn't. He sounded very, very conscientious and very good. I was delighted.
So Barbara, you have the historical reports that they've been sending?
Yes, on a yearly basis.
Perhaps, I'd like the selectmen to create a file for that, please. If we can get copies, please.
Right.
That'd be great.
But I think we don't have I only know that I asked for it, and I know we had it for 2 years. So I don't know how much longer before that, but we do have it for the last 2 years.
Okay.
We'll have to check the website, they may have a
Yeah.
sample and
Right.
that's on there as well.
And like Craig, though, one thing, he did seem to hedge a tish on the whole issue of whether the Colonial Water would be able to provide water to a development.
They would have to study it, I believe, is
Yeah,
what he
is
said.
that not what we all heard the same thing on that?
Very interesting comment.
Thank you. Okay, I wasn't like I was making this one
You know,
up.
lesson learned, we assumed that they had talked.
Right, and we
Uh,
never
he
did
just
that.
said once.
So,
Right.
you know, as we had developed these 61A issues, 40B issues, we have another box now to put on that.
And we should
As
contact.
the water,
Exactly.
Have they actually discussed it? Is there agreement in place?
Right.
right.
We learned a lot in the last
No,
session.
I thought he was extremely informative. I mean,
Yeah.
I had many questions that I didn't even have to ask him because he, as you already asked, plus he volunteered additional.
But if I might also underline your concern about 46 Springdale, the fact that it was continuously repeated that they had 65%, they were no higher than 65% of their capacity, and a new development of the 90 bedrooms or 40 houses, 42 houses would not impact that. Clearly, that had not been done, how did I say, thoroughly.
Barbara, you had mentioned that in one of the open hearings. Where did you get that data then?
From our well agent.
Okay.
And,
You mean the capacity level? You've got the 65%
Yes.
capacity
Yes.
of the level
Yes.
of
That's what
Georgia?
I was gonna know.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Well, that's the question, where does the denominator come from?
that's right.
I
And,
want to know who I assume it must
Well,
be
he's-
DEP who establishes the capacity.
Well, that's what we're trying to get at.
That's the
Yeah.
real
So,
nut, isn't
yeah,
it?
we need to move on here
Okay.
tonight, but, you know, we, just to reiterate, so
Yeah.
as we were going through this whole thing, this whole water issue came up in Springdale, we as a board committed to putting together a water, study committee. Barbara and the Board of Health have gone a long way towards helping us set that up. We talked about working jointly together to pursue this whole issue, so, I think we will be doing that.
Since there isn't somebody here from planning board, should we make sure that it's communicated to the planning board that whenever a development comes before the planning board and claims that it's going to be supplied by Colonial Water, obviously the Board of Health can't approve, you can't approve septic with no well without a check off by
Yes.
going to Colonial Water, so you now know that.
Now we know.
Yeah, so we'll have to check with, it's a good point, I think we'll
But
have
the
to check with
planning
Gina
board-
to see how
because,
they do
You
that.
know,
Yeah.
we'll get it at Concom and, but we need the planning board
Yes,
to
that's
have
a
that
good point.
checkbox to.
In a building permit, the application asks the water source for the house. So it doesn't ask to prove that, it's a checklist mentality.
Well, now we know.
Well, perhaps it's something, we have instituted over the years, a weekly inspectors meeting, which is an opportunity for all the inspectors and all the departments to get together, share information, make sure that projects are being handled, in a proper way, silos aside and so forth and so on. So perhaps, Dave, it would be a good topic for conversation at the next inspectors meeting, is to discuss this whole issue about how they go about saying okay to the perceived approval of a water connection.
I think they check a box.
So,
But now we know you have to go
Yeah.
back to Colonial.
Right. Lesson learned.
Okay.
Interesting, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. We are reviewing the operating budgets if you'd like to stay and listen. Why do they always laugh, Carol? Why do they always laugh? Yeah.
Aren't you also going to talk about the 46 Springdale Committee after this?
We're going to work on the charge. We're not going to be appointing committees tonight.
Oh, in that case.
But we are doing budgets.
Thank you, good night.
Okay, Barbara, thanks. So this is budget season, and we received most of the budgets last week, and 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, last meeting. And now it's time to slog through them all. So, shall we begin? We have Department 122. Dave Greer, is this yours, or Dave, or?
Greer to start.
Okay.
Budget highlights, so the budget highlights for the selectmen's budgets are basically what Dave touched upon at the last selectmen's meeting when all of the budgets were distributed to the board, except for these 6 highway budgets, which I believe you now are in receipt of, along with their narrative. The highway and the police, Conservation Commission, and Council on Aging also have accompanying narratives, so as you go, you can see, specifically what they've done with those budgets. As Dave said, the town accountant's budget has a change in it, a small increase to cover a crossover when the town accountant retires in June of fiscal year 16. The law budget is up. We will talk about these things as we go, based on increased demand for legal services, building maintenance. There is $10,000 in other capital outlay for painting the downstairs interior areas of the townhouse in fiscal year 16. Building inspector, as you know, was increased to full-time 35 hours this year. to accommodate the increased inspectional activity and also for administrative support because the experiment using another one of our part-time administrative assistants failed. There was too much to do in the building inspector's office. We are retaining 10 hours for administrative assistant wages that we hope to use in the coming fiscal year if the building inspector is not able to perform all of those duties in addition to his inspectional activities. And the group health, Dave reviewed, I think, in some detail, and he can speak to that tonight. The recommendation, the forecast is 15% over fiscal year 15. All of your budgets have been prepared in accordance with the step increment plan for non-union employees, collective bargaining agreements, and then any other existing contracts, and also using the Warren Committee's guidelines for energy costs, which are all essentially 0% over fiscal year 15 budgeted, except for electricity, which they asked us to do a slight increase, 1.7%, for all of the buildings, utilities, energy.
Great, thank you. So I guess we'll plan on actually going through and voting on all these at the next meeting.
Okay, good.
But perhaps what we can do is very, very quickly, just quickly go through to make sure that if we have any questions, that we give Greer and Dave and the departments a chance to answer them so that we can take a vote next week.
So I actually met with Greer and Dave. And
So would you like to
went
review
through
all
the
these with
budget.
us?
Right, I went through, it was very helpful. I would recommend others do it. So most of my questions were answered,
They're
right.
essentially formulaic at this
Right.
point. You
Yes.
just plug in the numbers for the coming year, and then any changes are highlighted, but really they've essentially been level service budgets over the past several years.
Yeah, so let's just quickly, I don't, the selectmen's budget is to your point, formula.
Right.
If this comes, the increases are, the total increase is 2.3%, and most of that is just the salaries per all the guidelines. Copying and postage, 0% increase. Town accountant represents the 1 month for turning over that we talked about.
And it's just a one-year blip,
Right.
or one fiscal year blip,
Right,
basically.
the audit's gone up a little bit, but that's normal audit stuff. Everything else is 0% increase. Treasurer collector, again, the salaries per the guidelines, and very little increase in anything else, almost none.
Right.
So,
You know, most of the increases are salaries.
yep. Law budget, always a debate, sort of like with snow and ice, pick a number.
So we picked a number.
So we picked a number. And I look back, and in 2011, the actual was $140,800. We're up to a budget this year of $190. We've put in a prior notice, just in case, because of the tremendous legal fees we have with Springdale, as well as other things that are going on with ZBA and so forth. So we're showing an increase to $200,000.
And it's variable. You take a look at 2013 actual, and it was just 130,000. So it is based upon what's going on in
Right.
town.
I mean, it's sort of a low level, probably
Right.
in the 80 or 90,000 range of
I
normal
don't think I've
stuff.
ever seen
And
it.
then you've got the different projects or lawsuits or whatever happens with Concom or ZBA, Board of Health.
May I ask the specific question on, we were involved in a lawsuit regarding Springdale Ave. Is that still floating around? Is that gone?
That has been dismissed.
Great, thank you.
Data processing,
Just the standard
just the standard
salary.
stuff. We always tend to have a large contingency in there under professional services as backup for Bill, which is absolutely necessary given the sensitive nature of outages and his vacation.
Are you on to Concom?
I'm on to Concom. Oh, my goodness, Concom. Oh. Forget them. I spent, hours, right? I mean, just.
There was a big increase here.
There was, and it's one of those things at town meeting, people see a percentage.
Right.
And they raise their hand, and that 21.5% increase, they're gonna ask the question. And I was reading the narrative to get a little more familiar with it. You know, part of the narrative talks to further analysis of the current Springdale Ave land acquisition. Now, the Board of Selectmen and the town have already voted for an additional $25,000 for this type of professional service, so you want to continue to include that in the narrative?
My thinking is that as we will hear from other properties in town who might be interested in giving us the first option, of first refusal on purchasing the property, that we're going to be involving a consultant, maybe not in anything fairly extensive, but we may have other properties
Okay.
we want to look at. So we thought we would take the baseline of what this year has been, and if we don't spend it all, better. But that if we have it available, we'll definitely be using it for that purpose.
Great, thank you, Candace.
And I noticed an increase, doubling of the trail maintenance budget, which I think is great. I remember being involved in getting this line item put in the first place. So it's nice to see that it's being used
Good.
and wants to be expanded. I think there's been a lot of great work done at Wild Rose as an example.
Good, thank
So
you.
that's great. Next here.
Board
Board
of
of
Appeals.
Appeals.
That's nothing. Salary.
Yeah, well, this is an issue again of how we account for the administrative support to the ZBA. And, my guess is that we have not been billing this budget.
We have not. I mean, there has been strain on the administrative resources in our office, but it comes in such that rather than putting the hours aside because the duties need to be done right then, we need to get legal notices in and get information out to committee members. We have not been breaking that out from the office, and it really has put a strain on us.
Yes, no doubt.
Yeah.
What I would like to do, just because to Jim's point, people tend to look down at the last column of the blue book,
Yes.
okay, and even though it's only 2.18%, zero is even better.
Mhm.
And since we haven't been really using it anyway, could we just level fund it, change it to level fund it?
Okay.
Okay.
Yes. Okay.
You know, Whiting Road is just utilities.
I didn't get a Whiting Road,
Department 191.
yeah. Oh, I did. I stand corrected. So Whiting Road is Doug's Automotive,
That's the rental, yes.
Yep.
and that's not a triple net lease, that's a gross lease, so we pay for the utilities.
That's correct.
But if these are the utilities, it's certainly being covered by the license fees.
Right, good.
Excuse me. Townhouse.
Townhouse, I had one quick question on the electricity, expense, which is a bump up of 1.7% over last year's budget, but it looks like the previous few years' actuals are somewhat lower than that. And probably by 50%. High, the budget higher than the actual usage. Do you have a reason why you want to keep it that high, percentage-wise?
We're just following the warrant committee guideline at this point.
Which is the one, yeah.
We have had a conversation based on the N-Star information that we're looking at perhaps a 20% increase based on the generation cost increase. So that could throw those numbers out. And when I spoke with the chairman of the warrant committee, he indicated that we'd talk about each one of the budgets when it comes to electricity on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah,
So this may be one of those.
on a volume.
Volume and, is 20%, does that stretch the budget or does that
No, I know it's a small number, but, when I know how conservative you are and you love have a number and so you don't have to do reserve fund transfers and things come back. But I'd be,
Well, we did.
wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't ask that.
Well, no, but it was an excellent question, because I think it was last year or the year before where we actually talked to the warrant committee about not using the guidelines
Uh-huh,
because the historical numbers were so different.
that's correct.
That we,
was
same
different
thing,
last
we
year.
had, was it last year? We had
I
the
think so.
difference between, the difference between the current year budget
Yeah.
and the previous year's actuals was so great that to even increase it more didn't make any sense.
Right. But when I first looked at the electrical increase, I thought it was way too low, given NSTAR's announcement. But then when I went back
To actuals.
to actuals, when I went back to actuals, I saw that we could absorb that.
Yeah, because the problem was, a lot of the committees are just doing a budget plus
Right,
warrant committee,
right.
and not really looking at what they're actually using, excuse me. So that's sort of compounded the problem. And it's not really a problem, but to get a clearer picture on the cost of the town, we'd probably dig deeper into the numbers.
Well, I think it's important for the readers, we're talking about a $5,000 difference here.
Absolutely, just.
And
in
so,
the big picture, it's a small
right,
number.
so if you increase, the actual by, say, 20%, half of that's gone now.
Yeah, and I hear Mr. Ramsey's thought process where NSTAR's already spooked everyone with a big
Right.
announced increase.
Right,
So-
right.
But it's worth talking also, because over the last couple of years, we really have tried to change that approach from those automatic increases over budget to really looking more at the historical actuals,
Hmm.
because you do get into that,
We're very tight on the heating oil for townhouse, close to last year's actual,
It's
so
on that.
we thought
Exactly.
there was
yeah.
an increase in the electric that we've been hearing about. That's where we would have a little
Okay, I
play for
can
that, because we
appreciate
really
that.
don't in the other utility lines for townhouse, and we have been bringing those numbers down.
That's a good point, Greer.
Yeah.
Well, the spot rate for oil though must be down significantly. I mean, I got an oil delivery
It
at
is
a price less than at least the 4 years of my quick record.
It is
so-
down.
Yeah, but the
Yes.
total
first
bill
delivery
isn't that
this
much
year.
smaller. It's like,
That's because as we get older, the thermostat goes up. I can't speak for you, however.
it's still, I was so, well, also, I think since they filled my oil tank, the price has gone down even more.
Yeah.
Hmm. Okay, thank you for that explanation, Dave and Greer.
Carroll Community Center. So I just, was actually a decrease, and that's a case where the fuel oil expenses did go down, and we kept the electricity the
Flat.
same. That's a little
Yeah, I noticed that, and
inconsistent.
I highlighted that. And any thought on that, David? Greer.
Electricity or fuel oil?
Electricity stayed the same, in other words, electricity stayed at 0% increase, because for the same reason as Jim just said, right?
Yeah.
Fiscal year 15 budget was so high was almost, again,
7.
It's
40%.
40%, yeah.
So I think we should be consistent. So,
The problem with consistency is consistent with what? If you recall, Carol, you've been around quite a while here, the warrant committee was struggling with, each budget was different. So they said, let's come up with a standard guideline. The standard guidelines resulted in some unintended consequences.
Right.
So now they're looking at a standard guideline, but take a look at the actual budget. So now we're starting to move back into budget by budget differences that are not consistent.
So that's the,
that's the nub of it.
That's right, in the warrant committee guidelines, it says, here are our.
right,
energy
except I think we need to be, but we need to be
Okay.
consistent. In other words, or be able to justify a different approach. So we just looked at one situation at the townhouse where the electricity budget for fiscal year 15 was 50% more than actual for fiscal year 14, but we're still increasing it by 1.7%. Here's a case where the difference between the budget and the actual is only 40%, and we chose not to increase it. So the logic isn't consistent.
Understand the
that's
point.
So let's figure out what logic we're gonna use and then explain to the warrant committee why we're gonna be consistent building to building.
I know the warrant committee has asked Dave's office to prepare an analysis on the actual expense for 14 versus the appropriation from last town meeting. So you can see the differences pop right out at you. And they were going to go back to individual high-volume users to change their numbers, or suggest in their presentations while in front of the warrant committee to change their numbers. So they're gonna be very active in that, in what you're suggesting.
All right, so that makes sense.
Yep. Why is the phone charge so much higher than, did we change the phone system over at the community center?
Family and friends.
The Council on Aging was added over
So it's
there.
calling for your,
The Council on Aging was added
oh, okay,
over there.
okay.
Yeah,
Yes,
they
that's
have a voice over IP now,
Okay.
in addition to talking to her.
Okay, got it.
I forgot that, thank you.
Town reports the same. Building maintenance. 0%, couple reductions. All those contracts are basically still the same. Police,
That's a very bland
yep,
number.
Pretty much contract driven.
right.
Yeah, the chief did a nice narrative on that, I read this afternoon.
Building inspector, so that's, we've talked about the increase in Walter's hours and the administrative support line item.
Right.
Yep.
So on a percentage basis, this was one of the higher
Right.
budget increases.
Yeah, 16.5 on a percentage basis.
Right.
The highest goes to Concom.
Thank you, Candace.
Just quickly.
Thank you. We're right behind you.
Not that we keep your score. I have a little cheat sheet with every single percentage increase.
16.
Emergency management.
Nothing really moves until we
You
get
know what,
down to
would you just
COA.
level fund the emergency management, please?
Yes.
Thank you. Right, I think there are a couple, there probably, we've eliminated some of the departments that had $1,000 type, things.
$500.
Yeah, so we've, eliminated that, cleared up. Some of these that are low budget items where the actual expenditures can vary from almost nothing, we really should just level fund each year instead of doing these increases. Animal control,
That's salary driven.
salary driven, care of trees. So we're done with the catch up from Sandy, so we're back to our normal plan. What we did after Sandy, because there was so much tree damage, that we increased the care of trees budget for the following 2 years to catch up, and now we're back to our normal maintenance plan. So we have a 5-year plan here that goes through 2019. Tree committee, same thing. Protective agencies building. The only question I had on that is, do we expect any kind of impact of the renovation on the energy utilities?
No. In
Well,
fact, the
'cause it's
chief
happening in the
mentioned yesterday in a
spring.
meeting that because of the timing of I think it was in capital budget, he might have said it quickly, because of the timing, they're gonna save on utilities by, when they're gonna
Well,
move
they're not gonna
outside.
have to put heat in the
Right,
garage.
exactly, that's
Yeah,
what it
they're gonna
was.
avoid putting heat in the
Right.
garage.
Yeah.
That was why
Germany.
they delayed
That's what,
the
right.
construction.
Okay. Engineering is just salary stuff. Highway maintenance. one thing we know about Craig and his budgets, they are to the bone.
Yeah, I haven't had a chance
Highway
to.
maintenance, just nothing increased there, snow and ice,
Just chasing the historical average.
right.
And we had our first snowstorm.
Level fund, Tarvia. Okay, let's just go through these quickly. So, nothing new on the highway per se.
I mean, the total increase is 1.47%.
I don't have all the new ones in here. So snow and ice is up $30,000. Street lighting is just the N-Star increase. Town garage, 0.06%. Target and patching.
Overfunded.
So this is the Tarvia and patching budget, we're level funding, but it meets the requirements of his pavement management plan.
It does.
Well, with the price of oil going down, you should be able to do more.
Good point. The transfer station. We're actually going to discuss an amendment to the wheelabrator contract after you finish going through these budgets. So this budget actually might go down a little bit by the time we're done this evening.
Okay.
Right. Water department, just salary increase. House on Aging.
The COA, the only one I question is, they continue to have the transportation number in there, only because the senior van isn't up and running. And clearly by next June, if the senior van is not up and running, I will carry people around the town.
You heard it here, make sure it's in the minutes, Mona. Jim Dolly said.
So
Bold.
that being said, and I had mentioned this to them, I wasn't too keen on having the full transportation number in there in the next fiscal year, which is 7 months, beginning 7 months from right now. Your thoughts, Dave?
My thinking on this, Mr. Dolly, is that because the transportation that's currently funded by the budget is different than van
What they
transportation.
rely on wholly, though.
It's what they rely on, and it's basically single-person, single-trip transportation. This is going to be socialized transportation. This is going to be a bus that will not be available to be used by a single person to a single destination, but by multiple
Well,
people.
if I may, it can if no one else has scheduled it.
I wouldn't recommend it. It's a lot more.
No, I know, recommended
It's
use
a lot
of
more
two different
expensive
things.
than hiring the transportation that's available now, because you'd have to call somebody in, so it wouldn't make any sense for us to do a taxi service with a van. So my recommendation would be to keep this in there as a different form of transportation. The van is supplemented with a different type of transportation, essentially trips for multiple people.
Okay, revisit it next year.
Yeah.
Okay, I can understand what your viewpoint is.
Is that distinction on how, on the different types of, the JFK transportation, which is single use, and the van, which would be group use, is that distinction understood by COA and whoever's booking the van?
In all the discussions I've had with them and sitting in the meetings, that has not been discussed publicly. So I don't know if it is clear or not.
I really can't answer that question. I don't know, Greer, do you have any?
No, my understanding is that this will be a slow startup to
Right.
see what the interest is in using the van locally, and essentially booking hours, possibly up to 3 days a week for different uses. One day would be grocery store trip, another would be local medical. But they're really not clear on that, and it would not be near 40 hours a week. It would be perhaps 6 hours a day. This is really all conjecture. at
Yeah, I
this
understand
point.
that. It's unfortunate, this is a big learning curve for everyone involved.
It
also.
really is, to see what the demand is and whether or not, in fact, seniors can schedule their doctor's appointments, for Tuesdays and Thursdays, if those are the days designated for local doctor's trips. And, they're regional also. So we are trying to get a sense of what it is that the needs are, but until the van is actually in use, it will not become clear to us.
I understand that, but the criteria for when a van is used, or I'm trying to get at the criteria for when a van is used versus a JFK is used.
I don't think there's specific rules, like just one person. If one person wants to go somewhere and the driver's on for hire, so to speak, on a payroll, that person gets to use the van. That's
That's not my understanding. In the
So
conversation,
we have a
So-
conflict.
we'll need to clarify that.
Yeah.
Because it really doesn't make sense for us to multiply the cost of a taxi when we can have a taxi for less money. And I don't know that the MWRTA would contemplate that for us, that we have run a taxi service for single people to single trips.
Okay, we have a hurdle there, let's get past this hurdle, figure it out, okay? And discuss this with the COA so everyone's on the same page.
Is the, so the van isn't up and running yet?
My next question, thank you. Thank you, Karen, for asking me. I asked every time I say it.
Can I remind you that the conservation budget's up higher than all the other budgets?
This is the highest budget.
We are still bird dogging the MWRTA for training dates to allow us to meet the requisite legal requirements for training certification. We're on that religiously. They won't do tailored training for our one person. He has to go to group training, and those group training sessions have been difficult for us to schedule. We've been in weekly contact at least with a training person who does this stuff. So
Where is
we're
the van physically?
at an undisclosed location.
See, when I sit with the COA and I say these things, I don't go over very well. I'll be honest.
In Dover?
It's not in Dover.
Okay, I guess we'll get updated at some point, okay, gentlemen?
Well, do we get the christening ride? Or-
Oh, no, there's a thought. Okay.
How many does it
Veterans?
hold?
8.
Veterans is flat.
Veterans is flat.
When will we know the assessment? Typically,
March.
March.
I think I saw a memo, but that promised something earlier this year, but
We'll
long
see.
promise.
Look at that in the building
Yeah.
plans. Sorry, I digress. Next one is Norfolk
Norfolk
County.
County, so we still have, how many students is it?
Is that three?
Three?
Is this a guess that there's 3 students next year, or is this?
It's a projection right now.
So we have 3 students this year,
Yes.
Yeah.
and we're projecting,
the same.
And I believe there's an enrollment date, which is the basis for that next year's assessment. So I think the 3 will apply even if we don't have 3 next year.
Oh, okay.
this Charleston mission is level. Memorial Day expenses are,
Zero.
we never do that we don't do that anymore.
Yeah, sure, Memorial Day. Be fun, that.
Is it?
Oh,
It's the second
okay.
page.
It's
There we go,
level
it's
funded.
level funded, yep.
Yeah, per Carol check.
Okay. Our debt number keeps going down, as does our, where's my principal?
Yeah, principal's down, interest is down.
Yeah, interest is down, as we pay off the various debts we've accumulated. Bank charges is level funded, we brought that down a couple of years ago. Norfolk County retirement, we don't have a number yet.
Where's that, February?
Is it, yeah, I'd say February, yeah.
Any hints about the bad news?
In the 8 to 10%, as you recall last year, that was a system-wide 10%. It resulted in an assessment to Dover of about 8%. For 2 reasons. I guess it's good news. The retirees are living longer, and they had to factor in recent poor investment results in trying to maintain their current funding schedule. So rather than extend the funding schedule based on poor investment performance, they stepped up and said, we'll increase the assessments to catch up for that and stay on our funding schedule.
Okay. Workman's comp,
Workers' comp is, this is the old budget versus actual conversation I've had brought up a couple times here. So you're looking at 13 and 14 actual numbers, and they're relatively short, and it's probably 55% of the projected number. Where do we get the projected number on an actuarial,
So the.
because our payroll
the
hasn't
numbers-
gone up that much to support a 100% increase in workman's comp, because workman's comp insurance is driven by payroll.
Right.
And your
it's also based on
experience.
And
experience. And
experience,
this is a
thank you.
3-year look back, and we have had a significant claim that's going to impact the budget at some point. Also, we no longer have a rate lock guarantee for fiscal year 16. In 14, we were guaranteed a 0% increase.
For the 2 years.
In fiscal year, no, I'm sorry, it was 0% in 13, 2.5% in 14 if we maintained a favorable loss ratio, which we did. We have no guarantee this year. We recently met with our rep, and she said, you cannot and should not count on our workers' comp dividends, the additional credits we received, and the Meyer rewards. We used $14,000 in credits to decrease our costs in fiscal year 15, and in other insurance we used, I believe it was $17,000 or $19,000. So we've been really getting a lot of credits and dividends to use against that number, but we were told specifically this year, don't count on that.
It's unpredictable every year.
The
Sometimes it's
commercially,
better,
workman's
sometimes
comp, you know, at the beginning of the year, you give them a payroll number, at the end of the policy year, they come in and audit those numbers in a commercial aspect. In the municipal aspect, is that the same
They
thing?
do.
Payroll audit, yeah.
They do.
But-
They
But
do.
that's just one factor, and then it's your experience rating. So
That's
if,
right.
so if you've had an accident, usually the experience rating goes up. So it's
Right,
your
right.
payroll plus that goes up.
And
And
when-
it sounds like we've offset our premiums with credits.
Yeah,
That,
I just learned that, it sounds like the balance too.
right,
Yeah.
so.
And we don't have the rate lock guarantee in fiscal year 16.
Good, excellent answer, great, thank you.
combination of things.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, you might want to make a little note of that underneath this
That's a
budget
good
thing.
point.
You know, like a couple of the budget, right?
Yeah. Well, it's a perfect explanation for a
Right.
big discrepancy.
Because otherwise, I think other, right, right, right.
Okay.
It's not even the percentage, there's
It's-
no real
it's
increase, it's the actual
Actuals versus
versus.
the budget.
Right.
Group health,
That's the 15% data that you've been, you revised on from our agent.
which is, but here we go to the same issue again, because it's almost 50% increase from fiscal year 14.
Well, we usually, in maybe January, February, move this number around. I know we did last year to decrease it against the wishes of someone at the end of the table. I won't say names.
Well, as I indicated, I think in the highlights, West Suburban Health Group for the last several years has been looting its reserves to artificially lower the premium increases. I think this year we're in was a 4% increase, and I believe the consultant had advised on a 9% increase. So, and our claims are running even higher than that. So that 5% difference between what they were advising and what we did by funding surpluses, 5% we're in the hole going into the next year. Then you look at your claims experience, which is running higher, and add that on, you've got a compounded problem.
Okay.
That's what's
So
reflected here.
when the downturn hit, we saw the number of subscribers increase because a lot of spouses that got laid off, whatever, were going on to various, to our employees' insurance and so forth, and that sort of leveled off and got a little better. What are we seeing as far as enrollees?
I don't know the answer to that question. I mean, it's a fairly stable group, but for the communities that are now exiting. Typically, in recent years, municipal health insurance plan design has been better than a lot of private opportunities, and we've seen some gradual migration in. I think that's still happening, but with 2 of the towns in the consortium taking a hike, that'll affect our overall group's population.
I mean, I'd like to defer, our approval on this budget until maybe early next year, calendar year.
And then Medicare is just a
Yeah. That's
percentage number, and other insurance.
The other insurance is just property insurance, so forth, so on. Why, did that go down from an audit or
the
a
market.
review of the structures or
It's the market.
of the market itself? Because I'm in the
Really?
commercial markets and I didn't see any type of reduction.
I saw like a 3%
Did you?
reduction in my property and liability.
For what year?
When did I renew? June,
Okay.
June through June.
Okay.
Oh, it's nice to see it.
Yeah, it's excellent. I
Over
was curious.
10% reduction.
I actually have a study somewhere, I'll send it to you, that Marsh prepared. I think it was overall market.
Marsh McCollum there? Yeah. You might, it was a calendar, so I wouldn't even see it yet.
Right,
Okay.
right.
Thank you, Robin.
It was just a slight, I mean, this was
Every
about
penny
less than the
counts.
rounding.
Okay, so just a couple of things to look into, and then we'll go through again next meeting, approve these. Are we on target with the warrant committee date? Are we-
Yes, it was the 18th or the 19th of December, and we meet on the 18th.
Yeah, good.
Thank you for all the work, I know it's a tremendous amount of work, appreciate it.
I think we should serve dinner when we go over budgets.
Can't afford it.
Can you add $30 into the pizza?
Take it out of conservation.
It won't move that needle at all, Candace.
Okay, moving on, way behind schedule here. The Springdale Ad Hoc Committee, once again, this is, I think, the third time now that we've looked at a draft of a charge for the Ad Hoc Committee that the Selectmen, I promised the town that we would create to study any and all possible future uses of the Springdale property that we were acquiring. And at our next meeting, we will be voting on appointments to that committee.
Correct.
This is the charge. I made a couple of changes to it based upon the discussions that we had at our last Selectmen's meeting.
I think it's good to go.
Yeah, I reviewed myself and I'm very happy with it. You did a great job. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol.
Okay, you're welcome. Okay, in that case, may I have a motion to approve the ad hoc committee charge dated 12/2?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great, okay.
If I may take this opportunity, I did tell the candidates that I spoke with that we were going to appoint tonight, my error. The intent was for all the interested parties to be interviewed prior to a selection process, and that didn't get done. So that's why it's not happening tonight. So I apologize if anybody's waiting or watching us for the first time.
Waiting with bated breath?
See,
It
I
will
was-
be done.
I was more general. I said somewhere around December 15th.
Yeah.
And I said before winter break, so there you go. I will take the draft stuff off of this and send you a final copy of it.
Thank you.
Yes. And so forth.
But even though we're not appointed this evening, the charge still will be effective January 1st. We want to get them up and going January.
Absolutely.
Right.
Okay, when we hit the transfer station budget, I mentioned that There is some work being done to amend the solid waste disposal contract that we have with with WMI, Waste Disposal Management, Wheeler Grader. Mr. Ramsey?
Madam Chair, the contract that we currently have with Wheeler Brader allows us, at I think a 10-year window, to terminate. A group of professionals led by Robin Chappelle in Walpole seized on that opportunity to renegotiate the agreement with Wheeler Brader. And if it goes through and all parties agree, or 75% of the communities agree, then our tip fee will actually go down. This is now the second time in my career that something's actually gone down, from our estimated $79 a ton July 1st to $64 a ton effective January 1st. A substantial savings to the town. It certainly makes sense to Mr. Hughes and myself. We forwarded it on to council for his review. It does require that 75% of the communities who are already under contract to Wheeler Brader agree to this. This is for your information and consideration tonight. I would recommend a formal vote at your next meeting, December 18th, and hopefully we'll have heard from council by then.
When you speak of 75% of the communities, is there a community agreement out there, much like Minuteman or Norfolk Aggie or?
They're all individual contracts, but the negotiation with Wheeler Brader was, unless we get 75% of these individual, or the tonnage, 75% of the tonnage from these communities to agree to this new contract, the deal is off.
One of the things I like about this, one of the amendments here is that effective in 2018, there's no guaranteed annual tonnage. So that if our recycling rates continue to improve, we don't have to worry about the left hand and the right hand being in conflict.
May I ask, is there an understanding why this number is going to be reduced so drastically?
The group that's been negotiating on our behalf and their counsel had done some research into other contracts, and they've determined that the $64 number is what the market will bear right now.
Competition.
Okay,
The solid waste market has changed dramatically from, I won't go back that far, but when you couldn't get rid of it for any price to now it's a competitive market. Waste Management is selling Wheeler Brader Technologies. They're divesting themselves. So the company that is acquiring Wheeler Brader obviously has an interest in keeping the customer base, and that was another factor in our favor.
So it was a good time to do
Very
this.
fortunate.
and how long, is this a 3-year agreement?
This would go through the term would be the same as the original agreement. It wouldn't extend beyond that.
Okay. Well, that's a very positive piece of news for this evening. If in fact this, how many communities are involved?
Somewhere between 20 and 30, Mr. Dolly. We had a meeting out in Milford 10 days ago or so to go over this, and
Was there a straw poll put together by the 20 or 30 communities on if everyone's going to accept this?
I think a betting person would say it's going to go. I mean, what's not to like?
Right.
That's what I'm thinking.
Exactly, I mean, it's. you
Why-
get-
why
get-
wouldn't you do
Reduce
this?
the price, you get
Right.
rid of the tonnage requirement,
Yeah.
which gives you tremendous flexibility with the recycling efforts. Yeah, I can't wait to tell the recycling committee about this. Okay, so we'll review this after town council has opined on it. Next item, award the bid for the installation of ductless mini splits at the Carroll Community Center. So this was an item on the town meeting in May, where we approved $15,000 to put air conditioning into the COA office. How many units?
It's 3 wall-mounted units. There are 2 in the main COA multipurpose room, and 1 is also in the Council on Aging Director's office. And then there's also an outdoor discharge unit, which all 3 of those indoor units are connected to.
Right, yeah, that's what makes these units so great. You can connect more than one to the outside. Tremendous variety of bids, once again.
Well, the spread was almost
Yeah.
Double.
Double.
Yeah. Which would, and the low bid came in at $11,000 even, which is well below the $15,000 estimate.
Are there any other costs associated with installing this, or the COA space above and beyond the 11,000?
No.
So it includes all the electrical work as well?
It for the
Everything's
wage
included.
for the laborers and so forth, that's right, that was all part of the bid.
And their references, so forth, so on?
We asked for 3 municipal references, and the building maintenance superintendent has spoken to 2 of them, and they were excellent, but he asked that, we wait until we hear back from the 3rd, and based upon satisfactory reference from the 3rd as well, then he recommended that the board approve that they'd be awarded to Healthier Solutions of Norwell, Mass.
Okay.
Okay.
So, do I have a motion to approve the bid from Healthy Air Solutions contingent upon an acceptable 3rd reference?
Do you want to time this with the arrival of the van?
So moved.
So, do I hear a second?
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, it is, 'tis the season. Vote early closings on Christmas and New Year's Eve. It's tradition in Dover that we close town offices early on Christmas and New Year's Eves. And we're always appreciated by the employees, as is what we do with the day before Thanksgiving.
Very much so,
Yeah.
Mrs. Lisbon. Yes, it really gives them a jump start to get, back with their families and cooking and partying and enjoying their relatives and friends.
Well deserved as well. So do I have a motion on those early closings?
It's at 1 o'clock, is that what I heard?
It's noontime on
Noon.
Christmas Eve and 3 p.m. on New Year's Eve. Yes.
I'll make the motion that we have an early closing on Christmas for noontime, Christmas Eve, I should say, noontime. Christmas is off, that's on me, the day off.
I was gonna say, so generous of you to give them half a day.
I don't know, we're willing to work.
And New Year's Eve, early closing 3 p.m.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. You guys work hard. Deserve everything you get.
Okay, special licenses. Guess most of the parties have been planned in the previous meetings. We don't have that many. I'll just read them off and we can approve them in bulk. Boston College on 12/9. Boston College on 12/12. Boston College on January 4. Boston College on January 5. And Craft Hall at the Dover Church on February 10th. Far in
Well,
advance.
These people are planners.
I'd say.
They're knowing that garden club.
So I move we approve these 5 special licenses.
Second.
All in favor?
I don't think I signed that one. You still have your cough. You still have your cough.
I was getting better, and then my granddaughter and grandson got very sick. And I saw them on Sunday, and voila.
The gift that keeps on giving.
Keeps on giving. Okay, we have some other special business that's is not on the agenda. We have an appointment, Mr. Ramsey.
Madam Chair, I spoke with the Veterans Agent, Paul Carew, and he's willing to re-up for another one-year term.
Wonderful. He has served us well.
He has.
I do recall there was an instance last year where Senator Rush asked us to confirm that the arrangement was copacetic with the Veterans Agent in the State House. So nothing negative has come out of that? Okay.
So I move we approve Paul Carew as our Veteran Service Director for a one-year term expiring the end of 2015.
So moved.
Can I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And there was the question on the personnel board, which we have to figure out if it was a
It's a moderator's report.
administrative, okay,
And I spoke with Jim Repetti this
Okay.
morning, and he's going to follow up.
okay.
Thank you.
Oh, okay. Capital budget. So we'd approved the capital budgets, and they were reviewed at the capital budget committee meeting earlier this week. As we were reviewing them, we realized that we try as, for a variety of reasons, not the least being the impact on the tax rate, to keep a relatively level capital budget expenditure each year, except for occasions when we have big items like
Right.
the renovation of the public safety building or a ladder truck. But our budget, and we haven't really looked at the totals of the out years, we actually have huge peaks. I mean, it's going from Mount Everest down to the Marianas Trench. So in discussing this with Dave, I'd like to recommend that we move some of the placeholders that we had to be more consistent. So the $600,000 to re-roof the townhouse, we moved from fiscal year 18 to 19. We just got the report in from the consultant on the pipes and controls for the heating system over at Carroll Community Center, which isn't on here at all. And our recommendation would be to put that in fiscal year 20 for the 1.3 million. And that,
That'll be part of the whole facilities improvement for the Carroll Community Center?
yeah.
Great.
And that we discuss the fiscal year 16 renovations to the Carroll Community Center as a facilities upgrade.
Yes, yeah, thanks. I jumped the ground down.
Yeah. So it's just retitling.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
So that levels out the years with the big ticket items, knowing that they're sort of placeholders anyway and can fit in wherever. It also allows us to show the total cost of the heating situation at the Carroll Community Center.
Yep.
How we choose to do it later on will be.
I was lucky enough to go to a capital budget committee meeting the other morning where they discussed this at length, and how they wanted perhaps CMAC, which is the advisory committee, and the Board of Selectmen to talk about the big picture versus the little individual projects that have gone on over the last 10 years and will go on for the next few years. So that's part of the big facilities improvement picture that we're going to be presenting. And it was a great capital budget meeting, and they're very supportive without giving a formal approval. I understand that.
Especially after the meeting, we all went over and had a tour of the community
Oh, that was a
center
good
by
idea.
Paul Warren. And, several members of the capital budget committee hadn't been there in a decade.
Right.
So the work that's been going on with the painting and the new parking conference room.
I
They took
have
the-
not seen that. It's
Took down the
supposed to be
drop ceiling, it's
spectacular.
this beautiful wood ceiling. And they're gonna do the same to the park and rec offices.
Hmm.
Took a look at some of the storage limitations we have that we're gonna be addressing hopefully next year. Some bathroom reconfigurations to make those more friendly and clean for families to use. So it's a wonderful tour as well.
Good. Did you go see the boilers?
Oh, the Titanic, it's like the Titanic, right? Amazing, absolutely amazing.
Yeah, I haven't seen them, to be honest.
Oh, yeah,
I
I've
saw
been there a
them
couple
probably
times. I mean, just
7
walk
or
through the
8
door
years
and you
ago.
see these huge asbestos, right, the white covering, is that?
Some of it is,
Some of it, clad boilers, I mean, this, half the size of this room, it's just amazing.
Okay, good.
Okay, so, do I have a motion to approve those changes to the capital budget?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great, okay, so if you could just make those changes and get the new paperwork out to the capital budget committee.
Yes.
That'd be great.
It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And then I sent around an email the other day that I received from Dawn Fattori, from Dana White, chair of the regional school committee. So last year, at last, we had an IMA, intermunicipal agreement, between Dover and Sherburne relative to capital expenditures at the region. Seems to be working well this year. Sherburne had wanted to make it a one-year IMA.
I recall that.
So the regional school committee has asked both Sherburne and Dover selectmen whether it would be okay for them to proceed with drafting and getting clearance through bond council for an IMA for fiscal year 2016.
Well, my viewpoint on this has not changed over the last 5 years. It's
So,
important
so
for the
that's a
campus.
yes.
It was seamless, the second it was signed,
And legal.
and legal.
Right.
So I support the regional school committee and Superintendent Bliss to go forth.
I do too.
Absolutely. Maybe we've started a new trend.
Right.
And maybe after 2 years, we'll make it, a 2 or 3 or 4 year.
Is that legal?
Probably not.
Okay, so I will let Dana know that we
That's
approve.
great.
Okay.
Do we know, and she'll let us know if it's approved by Sherburne as
Yes,
well?
yeah. That's all I had.
I have no further comments. Very productive meeting this evening.
No?
I would notice, I noticed a sign somewhere in the townhouse here about a blood drive that the Dover Police are sponsoring.
I'm not sure what the date on that
I think it was the
is.
18th, maybe?
It's not
Something
something
like that. For those that are interested in donating blood, stop by the townhouse and check the date out. Okay. Maybe they want to put it on the website.
Yes,
Right.
I'll see if it's on the police department.
Okay, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Thank you.